Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Brockton Bay Chronicles. My name's Keith. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, good friend, and first-time worm reader, Andy. Hey, man, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right, but with the recent rains here, it was starting to think like maybe an Endbringer event was coming. It was pouring down here. One place nearby got 12 inches in one day, so got some serious rain. But things are drying out now, so we're happy about that.
Glad to hear it.
In this episode, we'll be reviewing Arc 13, Snare, chapters 5 to 10, and the interlude. And as far as new business, we've got, again, some great questions and comments from YouTube.
Yes, we hear again from our regular contributor, Megafire7. This is kind of a lengthy one. Mannequin's harebrained attempt at killing Skitter and friends this time around came across as very manic, honestly. He obsessively tinkered on a way to beat Skitter this time, practically overnight, and immediately put it into practice because he was just pissed at Skitter for beating him. As a result, he gets his ass handed to him. Also, Aisha is incredible. She is so very observant and so empathetic. It's just that her judgment kind of sucks. Taylor is taking on more and more of a leadership role within the Undersiders, with her essentially brainstorming this attack plan. What do you think of her leadership style in general? Do you think her teammates will be okay with it going forward?
There is a lot to comment on there. As far as Mannequin, he is like the control freak of all control freaks, right? He wanted to have the perfect environment. He failed at that with his family, and you can see the huge overreaction when his environment that he's created for himself is shown to have some chinks in the armor, so to speak. And so, yeah, totally makes sense that he would just kind of freak out and immediately try to respond with some half-baked stuff, and it didn't go well. Aisha is, yeah, her power could be super, and it's hard to know what her boundaries might be, but so much of our judgment and wisdom, I think, comes from what we see modeled around us, and she had about the worst models possible. So
Very true.
not surprising that her judgment is pretty stunted, and she's only, a teenager. So it's hard at that age to have good judgment anyway. As far as Taylor goes, I think, yeah, I agree. She is getting more of a leadership role. I think her leadership style is still developing. And, it's as a person who at different times in my life thought I should be a leader and then was told I wasn't a leader. And then I'm kind of in a management leadership position now. There's always that kind of questioning of yourself, as would somebody else be better doing this? Am I doing this right? And it was even more that way when I was younger. And typically only came up when I kind of reached a breaking point and just couldn't take stuff going on around me anymore, and just kind of said, no, we're doing it this way.
Yeah.
And so I think it's still evolving, her leadership style. I think her teammates will be okay with it going forward, but I almost see it as like to use a sports analogy, like an offensive and a defensive coordinator, and then a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
So, Taylor definitely seems to be the one that wants to go in and attack and is always looking for angles. Brian seems to be the one that's a little bit more conservative and wanting to make sure things are going well. And I could see Lisa as kind of being the head coach, if you will, taking the inputs from the people who have the expertise and then saying, we're going this way. And just like typical, head coach Vince Lombardi used to joke that once the game started, he was like a fifth wheel. He was worthless because he had done everything he could to prepare everything, and then he had to let his field generals run the field.
Yeah.
And so I kind of see Lisa being in that kind of role where it's like, all right, let's look at all, all right, I heard your side, I heard your side. All right, this is what we're doing. We're all on the same page. Now go, and I'll watch.
So you think the team dynamic as far as leadership is still evolving?
Yes, I think so. And it's understandable. Taylor's a recent addition. They've been hit with an unbelievable amount of just crap from all sides, and they're all young people, so they're all finding their way through life to a certain extent anyway. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still evolving.
All right, cool. We do have a question that I think is going to be best saved till we go into your overall impressions. So we'll set that aside for right now. The next question is actually from yours truly. Skitter was initially rated a Master 5 by the Protectorate. At this point in the story, do you still agree with that assessment? If not, what would you give her? And referring back to that limited chart I gave you for classifications, do you see any other abilities that might apply to her?
Well, in the Protectorate's defense, all they can do is rate by what they can see. And, they're showing up at different things and watching events as they unfold. And at the beginning, I think Master 5 was legit. But it's like, those computer games, like the Madden football games where a player's a rookie and they're given certain, this speed rating, this catch rating, whatever. But then as they continue to get better, then you're looking for that, 99,
Sure.
the top rating you can get. So I would say Skitter is, and again, I'm pretty sure it's not a linear scale,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say at least a Master 6 and maybe even a Master 7, given all the stuff all the ways she's continued to expand her power over the insects.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking over that list, I would add Thinker as another ability. It's kind of untamed, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But what we kind of saw is maybe an evolving strategic mindset, I think is becoming more than that, because, well, it's hard. It's a really short story if the main characters are unlucky and they die
Yeah.
at the end. And so a part of story development is having that element of luck happen. But you could see that there's almost reading between the lines. It could be her subconscious picking up on what the probabilities that there will be a lucky happenstance. So in some of the stuff we're going to talk about later, they're in the dollhouse area.
Mm-hmm.
And so, maybe there's some subconscious part of her that's thinking that the parahuman that's there might assist them in some way. Maybe there's some part of her that's factoring that in, kind of. So I don't know, just speculation there. But I think it's gone beyond just a strategic mindset to actual thinker ability.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for answering those questions there, buddy. And as I said, we will get to the last one when we get to your overall impressions. So for now, let's move on into our review. And we begin with Skitter out and about looking for Bitch. And she comes across her as she's trying to retrieve the normal body of Bentley from inside his monstrous forms. Wildbow's giving us quite a bit of information here about what actually goes on when Bitch transforms her dogs. What do you think of that?
I thought it was a great way of picturing it and describing kind of the inner workings.
Mm-hmm.
It was easy for me to think of it as more just almost an illusion or a projection somehow that I can't think of a good term like the way the Ghostbusters described it, like an ectoplasmic residue, like stuff that would
Yeah.
what was just sucked out of the air and kind of aggregated around or whatever. But the way Wildbow describes it, it's actually like they're being born again almost, like they're in some kind of womb, some kind of protective environment inside of these shapes that are generated. So I really like the way it was described. It's not the way at all I pictured it being, though.
Yeah. So as she's trying to retrieve Bentley's form from inside his monstrous shell, Skitter assists her, even offering Bitch the knife to help her gain access. And they have a pretty frank discussion. Bitch, she seems to be, well, not confused. No, confused is not the right word. She is annoyed by this entire situation. She doesn't want to be told what to do. She says that several times. And Skitter is doing her best to reach out to her and say, things won't get easier for you if you join the Nine. Because at one point, Bitch had even said, you know how much easier my life would be if I just kill you with this knife.
Yeah, I think Bitch is in that situation where, and it's something many of us encounter in our lives, where we're reluctant to venture into something, but we know we should. And it might happen multiple times. It's kind of like, once you get bucked off the horse, you got to climb back on.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a painful enough fall, eventually you're like, you start really beating yourself up, how thick is my skull if I can't get it through there, that I'm just not meant to do this. It can be if you're really wanting to be in a relationship and you keep ending up and breaking up with people, or you want to be in a particular, like me, you think, oh, I was meant to be this kind of athlete, and it's like, no, you're only, you're a short guy and you have bad eyesight, so basketball probably isn't your sport. But it's, and eventually you get fined, that's, I'm taking my ball and go home, or I'll just throw my ball in the lake and forget it. And so I really think Bitch has, kept coming up against the need for companionship, the need to belong, and it keeps getting just trashed. And every time she tries to, move that way, it just ends up, she kind of pulls back a bloody stump. And so she's just like, fine, screw all y'all. And it's, even when people are trying to help, it's just like, you just get in that mindset where it's like, this is just some other scheme to try to get me to open up, and then you backstab me again. So I totally get where she's coming from.
Yeah, I think the predicate laid down by Wildbow in Bitch's interlude really makes this particular scene pop for me, because we know how damaged she was even before she got her powers. And,
right.
Life was not kind to Rachel Lent. And so here she is now. And this fact that Skitter calls Rachel her friend. She says, yes, you're my friend. I think of you as my friend if you don't think of me as your friend. And that's really powerful when you look at where these two have started at their relationship at, where we see where Rachel's life was, and now we see at this moment where Skitter is extending this hand in a meaningful way to her.
Yeah, and Skitter really sees the similarities between what they've been through. Obviously the magnitude is probably very different.
Sure.
But when you study like abuse or people going through tragedy, it's really hard to assess magnitude. Some people just have thicker skins, or some people are more optimistic. And so things happen to them and they're able to kind of push through it better. And other things or other people might not have as thick a skin. And so stuff happened to them is worse. Or if it comes from a particular angle, it may hit them harder than it would hit someone else.
Right.
But yeah, given the background on Rachel, it's totally understandable that she's very once bitten, twice shy kind of thing, because she's been bitten way more than once, and is just her in the pack against everybody else.
Yeah, that she understands. She's
Right.
Hey, me and my pack. These dogs love me. I love them. The rest of y'all can just go spit, kind of thing.
Exactly.
During this difficult conversation, and Skitter finally comes out to bitch and manages to turn a corner with her, and brings up the fact that she wants the team to go on the offensive, no holds barred, and that kind of got bitch to think, well, yeah, okay, fine, let's go for this. All she wanted to do was to be left alone. That was the thing. She recounted how, oh yeah, that's right. She recounted how Coil first got into contact with her. And then Skitter had speculated about, I wonder if she had suddenly been getting more harassment from the cops and from the capes right before, as if maybe Coil was driving,
manipulating it.
Yeah, making the offer a little more enticing to her. Anyway, as I said, bitch is on board with this. Skitter uses her bugs and finds Genesis's form. She's attempting to put out fires in the area. They decide they're going to convene the Undersiders and the Travelers at Skitter's location, and they're going to discuss their new options.
I just have to interject a little humor here.
Yeah.
So when they described Genesis' form, I was put in mind of one of the old Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors episodes where Bart's he's learning to spells or something, and he reads off one of the spells, and Lisa turns into this giant snail and doesn't know it, and he looks over at her, and his eyes bug out. She says, what he says, nothing, I got this. And then he reads another spell, but that was the picture that jumped into my mind.
Nice. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so Skitter and Rachel make it back to her place before everyone else is there. Genesis actually is there. Her body is there, and she and Skitter talk about a couple of things. Skitter mentions her desire to go on the offensive against the Nine, and she notices a little more about Genesis's physique. This young girl's been in a wheelchair for quite some time, and she speculated about whether that was a result of her getting her trigger event or something that happened in costume. And Genesis was kind enough to say, hey, no, if you got a question, just ask.
That's always a tough situation. You don't want to put people on the spot or make them feel uncomfortable, but most people who have some kind of thing going on will usually, I can remember getting a broken arm at one point and in grade school, and everybody asking me what it was, and seeing somebody else had actually put on their sling, don't ask. And so it's like, okay, well then you immediately, you beat him to the punch. You don't have to worry about the question. But yeah, Genesis is used to that, and she tells Skitter about it. The interesting thing, I thought, and this kind of is a running thread through this whole section we're talking about, is just how the Travelers have this really weird dynamic that just kind of defies deciphering. It's just Genesis is like, oh, people are coming, and she's like, oh, great. it's
right.
Like, so yeah, and similar things went through Taylor's mind when Rachel was showing up sometimes. It's like, oh, great, but it just seems like it's between all of them, which is just really weird. Why are they still together then? And so yeah, I'm interested to see down the line what this turns out to be, because I'm having trouble figuring out what could be keeping them together.
Right. Yes. I'm going to stop myself. Yes. Anyway, moving on. Skitter actually asked Genesis about her capability, about her power. As Skitter says, she's ridiculously powerful. Any comments on the description that we got?
It was very interesting, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, I have trouble wrapping my mind around how this even works. I can't think of a similar thing from any comics or anything really. And so I have trouble envisioning how this works. But yeah, I could see the potential is definitely there.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the way Wildbow describes it. I'm having trouble really wrapping my head around it.
Yeah. So as we're moving toward the end of this chapter 5, everybody convenes. Gru gets there, the travelers, everybody. Tattletale and Coil phone in, and that's where Skitter decides to give everybody her idea for this going on the offensive kind of thing. And she made an interesting comparison, comparing the Undersiders to the 9, and said that the 9 are us on steroids when we're at our best.
And I think that's part of the thinker ability coming out, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
She's able to draw these comparisons and then say, all right, well, given that, say we take that as a given, what can we extrapolate from that? And it's like, all right, well, the 9 chooses the battlefield. They choose how the fight goes, and that's how the Undersiders have run their gigs. And so it's like, all right, well, if the 9 has been doing this all this time and had a lot of success, then we need to not let them do that. And the Art of War and the Book of Five Rings talk about all that. The same kind of thing. You choose the battlefield.
Yeah.
If at all possible, you keep the high ground.
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing. And so she's just kind of taking a page out of that book, but to have the insight to realize that, okay, yeah, we do work best this way too. So how do we turn it so that we are working from our strength?
And she was talking about bring a lot of power to bear against the 9, as you would expect. Asked again about deploying Noel, asking if Ballistic and Sundancer, who are among the most powerful capes in the town at the moment, if they'd be willing to kill, talking about everybody carrying firearms and using explosives. This is a pretty serious deal she's talking about.
Definitely. And that's what you have to bring to the table. It's kind of like that scene from Aliens, well, let's nuke them from space. It's the only way to be sure. Yeah. It's, if they bring a knife, you bring a gun. You've got to overwhelm them. There's no, with folks like Crawler and Siberian that you're up against, there's no way to kind of go at it halfway. You've got to be set up. But yeah, it's a pretty great plan they come up with, I think.
Yes, as we're moving into chapter 6, and this is the execution of this plan. Yeah, another nail-biting, nerve-wracking plan. But initially things seem to be going okay. Setting aside the fact that Ballistic has a last-second change of heart when it comes to sending an armament and taking out Cherish. This was pretty good from Wildbow. It's easy for us to sit here as readers and go, yeah, kill her, yeah, you throw the grenade at her, and blow her away. But these are real individuals he's writing and creating in this world. They're not all psychotic killers, and so second hesitation. I didn't have any problem with that. I mean, yeah, on one hand, like I said, I'm like, yeah, take her out. On the other hand, looking at it from his point of view, irritating, but an understandable hesitation.
I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. And as we find out later, it wasn't as much of a total surprise ambush as they thought it was.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
so I'm wondering if maybe Cherish was messing with his mind a little bit
Oh,
and trying to make him not want to kill her.
oh wow! I never even considered that.
Because, she, if she knew they were coming and she started sussing out their plans, then it's like, all right, well, yeah, a giant rocket is going to take me out. There's no recovery from that. But this other guy would just shoot me, and I probably could survive that given all the stuff I've been augmented. So I'll make the guy that's the most likely to take me out second guess himself. I don't know if that's what happened, but
I'm going to agree
that's
with
the
that. I'll go with that part where she may have, and I don't know if that's canon or not. Maybe someone can put in the comments whether or not this is actually, if we have any word from Wildbow on whether that was deliberate. Did Cherish influence the hesitation from Ballistic? I'm going to, yeah, I'll go with your premise on that. But with regards to Trickster, I think that him sniping at her was so last minute. I'm going to say that was too spur of the moment for her to realize that, oh my God, he's going to shoot me, kind of thing.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I think she tried to find the most dangerous opponent and influence them.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowing that she had to kind of roll the dice with whoever stepped up, and
Okay.
that somebody probably would. So I do give, if that is what happened, I let Ballistic off the hook. But
Mm-hmm.
if it wasn't, then I see hesitation. It's not like these folks are hardened soldiers, and even hardened soldiers sometimes
Yeah.
struggle. It's at the end of the day, Cherish is a young woman. I don't know exactly how old she is, but she's probably less than 20. And so, but when Regent says she made people kill their own kids and enjoy it,
Right.
and then rug pulled and made them live with the aftermath of what they had done, it's like, yeah, okay, fine. That's enough for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. If he was manipulated, I give him a pass. If he wasn't, then not happy with Ballistic.
Okay. All right. I hear you. I hear you. Boy, this entire plan was pretty crazy. Having Trickster teleport them at the last minute, bringing along the what was it, the mannequins on the rack, and then swapping Gru and Ballistic out for them, and then ultimately swapping Gru out for Sundancer. Do you want to go into any depths on this particular battle? I mean, it was bananas. They were on their way to Dolltown, as it turns out,
Right.
which is Parian's territory, as you noted earlier.
Right. Yeah. Well, two things. One is I thought it was great what they did with Crawler and how they handled him. And yeah, that would have been so frustrating to
Mm-hmm.
just keep getting almost there and then you're back where you started. Like, man, I didn't really get the part where Sundancer had, the giant ball of sun
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the alley, and Crawler ran at her and then they had her turn it off. I thought, why wouldn't they just let Crawler try to burn in that thing?
Because he regenerates. Remember,
Right.
remember his whole deal is taking on opponents who will help him evolve.
But it's the sun. I mean,
Well,
nothing escapes the sun. I just, they had mentioned earlier on that Skitter was saying, that incredible power
mm-hmm.
that Sundancer had. And it kind of reminds me, I guess, a little bit of, and I probably mispronounced this, but the Elven Queen from Lord of the Rings, Galadriel, when she has the chance to have the Ring of Power, and she turns it down, and she says, "I would have turned into this fearsome queen, that would have been too separated from people to, you would have been afraid of me and I would have been awesome.
Right.
And so I'm guessing that's probably how the parahumans feel, who worry that their stuff could get out of control, that they would just, go on a total power trip. And it's like, oh, I could just take out that whole town where those people made me mad.
Oh.
Panacea kind of went through that, right? She knew she could heal her dad's brain, but that once she crossed that line, what's to keep her from just mucking with anybody,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, you don't want to give me a discount at the store? Boop. Oh, you're just going to let me have it for free? That's so cool. Thanks. And so I get that Sundancer might not want to, just melt downtown or Dolltown. But yeah, I just figured that the power of the sun would be more that there'd be nothing left to regenerate. There'd be breaking of molecular bonds.
Good point.
But I don't know. That's just, it would have been a bigger roll of the dice. He might have gone partway in.
He seemed like he was willing to take that roll. He was going to try to roll the hard 6 and see if he came up with it. My goodness. So yeah, he lunges, as you said. He gets pissed off at being teleported every 5 seconds, chases down her son. Meanwhile, if I'm not mistaken, Siberian is lending her invincibility to Bonesaw and Jack.
Right. And that's pretty incredible. The other thing I really liked about their plan was after everyone was teleported, they blew up the buildings that they had been on. So they lured them there and then bopped out and nuked it. And so that worked out great for getting why can't I think of her name now?
Siberian? No, Shatterbird.
Shatterbird. Yeah.
So, that was crazy. There's a lot going on there. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, and then I love the way they used Genesis in a chariot mode to just kind of vacuum up Cherish off of the floor.
She accidentally got scraped for a little while. Oh, geez, what a shame.
We dragged her for a few feet there. Oh, bummer. Yeah.
Yeah, with the bullet wound in her side or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
So that was Battlefield Commander Skitter making maximum use of her assets. I mean, this was primarily her plan. So yeah, a lot of good planning on her part. So she made suggested that Genesis take a form where things could go in, but they couldn't get out.
Well, and they stashed her there where,
yeah,
they would have, after they lured Shatterbird, she would probably end up down in that area. So yeah, there were an awful lot of moving parts to this. And, if it hadn't been for Ballistic, I think this would have worked pretty well. Because they almost pull it off as it is. So yeah, I think that again shows how her ability as a thinker is kind of evolving too. She's able to handle more and more chainsaws and apples and stuff juggling in the air and not get cut. So
so that was a good battle. They ended up picking up Cherish and Shatterbird, and so we move on into chapter 7. We pick things up back at Coil's base. It takes a little bit for them to get Shatterbird to calm down. Yeah, that's right. Skitter had put Black Widows inside Genesis form in order to convince Shatterbird that she needed to chill. Once they get back to the base, that's when the negotiations with Cherish begin.
Because Gru got captured.
Right.
Which was, that was, and I thought if I were in Skitter's place, my heart would have done more than skip a beat at that point. I would have probably passed out or something because, she's just too nice a person in a lot of ways for her to be able to deal with that, I think. But yeah, so now they got to put the screws to Cherish to try to figure out how to get Gru back.
Yeah, there was not going to be a negotiation. She tried to, Cherish did, wondered if $1 billion, they could come up with $1 billion to get information they needed in order to rescue Gru. And just the thought of him being in their clutches. It was pretty terrifying. Oh, I don't want to skip over the quick conversation or the exchange between Skitter and Gru prior to the teleportation. It sounded like Skitter was the one who was going to volunteer to do that, to be the one that got swapped out for Shatterbird. But because of her injuries, Gru said, "No, that's not going to work. You can't even run. I'll do it."
Yeah, that was interesting. Another example of Gru being kind of the protector, putting himself in harm's way, and it makes sense. I mean, he's more of a brawler anyway, but it's tough. It's like playing one of those games like Warcraft or something. You typically want the tank in that position to absorb the damage or be able to get away, but sometimes stealth is better. And who's to say with her strategic thinking that Skitter might not have been able to come up with something. But it's a really bad situation now with, you don't know what's happening to Gru.
And we find out during this interrogation, we find out that Cherish actually knew. This is where we've discovered that she knew that the ambush was there. And because of the deal she struck with Imp, that she didn't give away the information, even though she could sense them. Yeah, this is not a good situation. Tattletale does a great job doing what she does best, divining information from Cherish. Have you, at this point, begun to get more of an appreciation of Tattletale's power? I asked because I remember early on, she used to creep you out the way her power worked.
Well, this is definitely the right situation to have her for sure. She just cracked Cherish like a walnut.
Yeah, she did.
And Cherish was thinking she was all Billy Badbutt, and then it's like, wait, I didn't say anything. How did you figure that out? It's like, just lie down. You're dead. And
jeez.
And Tattletale just does an amazing job with her. It's still creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely not want that power turned on me if I was trying to, hide something. But I'm trying to. Did you ever watch the show Lie to Me?
No, I never. I remember seeing commercials, but never watched that one.
It's really good. And the guy he's studied what's called micro expressions.
Mm-hmm.
So, like when somebody smiles, if they're really smiling, then they'll get like little crow's feet at the corner of their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a genuine smile, if it's just like a fake smile that they're just going along with you, then that won't happen. And so he had studied just, tons of tape of that. So that's kind of how I picture Tattletale's power, at least in a very limited sense. But the guy in the show was defeated one time because the woman he was interrogating had Botox. So her face couldn't move at all. So he's like, I think she's a psychopath. I don't know what's wrong with that person. And then finally it's like, oh, wait, she had Botox. Okay. Her face cannot move. So, I think if I had to go up against Tattletale, I'd definitely go for Botox.
Yeah, there you go. So Coil turns Regent loose on Shatterbird. They have her in a confined area and have a suit for him to protect him. And however many hours it's going to take, he's going to go to work on her. Skitter comes up with a suggestion because picking up Cherish was a unexpected get. Coil hadn't planned on a place to secure her, and Skitter come up with the idea, hey, why don't we stick her out on the lake somewhere tied to a buoy, and that way we can, if something bad happens, something goes south, we can tell the 9 where she is.
I thought that was a brilliant plan. And that's the problem when you think you're negotiating from a position of power and you kind of give away what you want. Then when the tables are turned, you can kind of say, well, if they really don't want to go back to the 9, then we will threaten them with going back to the 9. So it reminds me of those cop shows where the low-level person gets busted and he's like, oh, I'm not afraid of going to prison. And the cop says, well, we're not putting you in prison. We're going to put you back on the street.
Yeah.
And then tell everybody that you blew the whistle. And he's like, oh crap, no, put me in prison. So yeah, I thought this was a great, especially, just kind of on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that really was disturbing, I guess, in the scene was the way Cherish kept throwing things out as she was picking people's brains with her power.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know if she's just flailing and throwing things out to try to mess with people or if they're legit things. And then, the wheels within wheels start turning for me. And I'm thinking, well, did Coyle have some ideas of what could be done, but he's trying to manipulate, he went off and did his thing and
Mm-hmm.
said, oh, this will work better if you let Skitter come up with the idea than you come up with the idea, or if you support this. It's always hard to know
Mm.
how much he's kind of tried to see ahead and figure stuff out, and then whether he's actually, oh, that's a great idea, or oh, I'm so glad you finally said it because I was getting tired of biting my tongue. So
Yeah, this guy,
it's
the Coil factor. I don't think that even now on my second read of this thing, I don't think that I factor him in as much as I probably should. So as they're trying to come up with a plan to rescue Gru, once it is determined what they're going to do with Cherish, Skitter points out that there is one group that is not part of the coalition against the Nine that Hook will set up, and that's the Protectorate. And Skitter reaches out to them in a very unique way.
yeah.
What were your thoughts about that? Pretty good use of her power carrying the micro camera and the mic over there to the Protectorate, and then using her swarm, creating a clone there, and having a conversation with Miss Militia and Legend and Company.
I thought that was really well done. She had kept in the back of her mind that Tattletale had the surveillance equipment from Coil, so she said, well, why couldn't I use that too?
Mm-hmm.
And she incorporates it into her, like I said, her swarm clone pattern that she uses, or her strategy, and it works really well. Unfortunately, the Protectorate doesn't step up to the plate, and
Were they was Miss? I mean, that was Miss Militia's call. What were you? Do you think she was right on that?
it's tough. They're not sure, as the dialogue goes back and forth, they're not sure where Skitter is at, and they definitely get a little bit preachy or judgmental, or well, the law says that this is what has to happen. And Skitter harkens back to things that Bitch has said. And it's like, yeah, I get where she's coming from now, because they're
Yeah, that
just,
was a good callback. I liked that.
yeah, because those platitudes, it's like, look, we got stuff to get done. Will you just shut up for a second and just say, are you going to help or not?
Mm-hmm.
Not just, well, we're not in, our bylaws state that unless there's an end break, it's like, you know what? Forget it.
Now,
But
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
go ahead.
please.
I was just going to say, I thought Skitter and Trickster did a great job working that and everything. And I get where the Protectorate's coming from. They don't know where Skitter stands for sure. But it's one of those things where it's, you got to go against the biggest threat, I think. And when they're down, then you don't let them get back up. And I think they missed an opportunity. So I would say Miss Militia made the wrong call at this point. But
Do you like this scene as Wildbow used it? It allowed Skitter to lay out the bill of particulars against herself when she said, "I wonder how would the Protectorate see? How do they see me? Am I an unhinged villain?" And then she goes through all the things that she has done that's as in her life as a criminal. Did you find that an effective way to set that up for her to have that inner dialogue?
definitely, yeah. And it's one of those things that in any situation you have to try to, if you're trying to not manipulate, but at least convince somebody, then you have to try to put yourself in their shoes. That's usually an effective way to do it. And you're trying to think, well, yeah, what they're seeing is these behaviors or
Yeah,
these events.
let me read off this section just to cap that. Except I couldn't help but see myself from their perspective. Warlord of the boardwalk, I'd rotted off Lung's manhood, carved out his eyes. I'd played an undefined role in Armsmaster's downslide. I robbed a bank, terrorized hostages with poisonous spiders, attacked their headquarters, used insects dipped in capsaicin to cripple their junior heroes with incapacitating pain. All the while, I acted with a seemingly ambiguous morality. Was I a good guy doing all the wrong things, or did they see me as as dangerous and unhinged? Quite the paragraph.
And I think it captures it really well. But, I would think that, well, we find out more things later that kind of frame this up a little bit. That the Protectorate is definitely got the nine, that whole group is public enemy number one, or public villain group number one, but that the other ones aren't that far behind it. And it kind of harkens back to what Skitter said, that, the nine are just us on steroids. It's like,
right. And people are beginning to see that.
Right. So it's a tough call, but you would think that there'd be somebody on the Protectorate side, like Dragon, or somebody who crunched a bunch of data and said that, like Armsmaster, he had done all that stuff, evaluating the Endbringers and come up with different strategies and stuff. And so you'd think they would have done some other similar dossier on the Undersiders and realized, well, they could have killed all these people, or this could have gone that much worse, or all these things that could have gone worse, and realized that they didn't go that horribly, or they weren't as evil as they could have been. And so maybe give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. But I don't know. It's a tough call. I see where the Protectorate's coming from, and I think Skitter does too.
Armsmaster has escaped. Surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. What's up with that guy?
Did he escape?
I mean,
did he have help? What do you think?
That's a really good question. It seemed like there was definitely a deeper rapport building between Armsmaster and Dragon. And so I could definitely see, as we'll read about in the interlude, that Dragon could have helped in some way, or Armsmaster could have manipulated Dragon in some way to convince it to help. But you can totally see that he'd want to do that, right? I mean, he's probably imagining, this is my way to get back in the good graces. I can take out the nine, just like I was going to take out the Endbringers. I have the answer. I know what I can do. So I think he's going to go try to be the hero again. There's a slight possibility that Mannequin or somebody, is trying to break him out, or has facilitated breaking him out. Who knows what Mannequin did going through the ductwork and stuff. He might have changed things in there. But yeah, I think Armsmaster's just trying to get back on top of the pile and sees this as an opportunity.
Okay. Well, after the conversation with the Protectorate yields no results, at least Legend gives us a sincere wish for success in the upcoming attempt to rescue Gru. That takes us on into chapter 8, and we see Trickster's plan implemented. This is he comments to Skitter toward the end of the last chapter that her use of a particular phrase actually inspired a bit of an idea in him, and they commence to try to go in and rescue Gru. And as part of that rescue, they actually pull in unwittingly, using them as pawns, they pull in the Hookwolf's contingent of criminals.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty brilliant, trying to distract the nine, thinking that other people are attacking them.
Mm-hmm.
But as typically happens, and because it's a little bit like the mannequin reactionary thing, and it's not fully baked. So the nine, is somewhat prepared and has some tricks up their sleeve. And so it's looking really good. And I love the they've turned Shatterbird, so they're able to use her, and then they've got the fake crawler that Genesis is mimicking, and that's pretty good. So it's a great subterfuge, but it's not taking into account what the nine might have in store for them.
Yeah. I am pretty sure when I first was doing the audio of this, I am reasonably sure that I stopped multiple times listening to to the story when it got to this part because of the brutal nature of the descriptions that were going on. Those poor people that Bonesaw had performed plastic surgery on in order to make them look like the nine. It will come to here in a little bit the way Gru is treated, the way that Skitter was tortured. I didn't get through this one in one easy listening session. I'm pretty sure I stopped several times.
Well, and as I mentioned to you, this is where my son stopped reading because he said it just got really dark. And as I was reading up to this, I'm like, how bad can it get? I was like, oh, well, that's pretty dang bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised when you said that he kind of dipped there.
But I was more of the um, train wreck variety. I couldn't take my eyes away. I kept having to keep reading and be like, oh, how much worse can it get? Oh, what's going to happen next? Oh my gosh, that's horrible. What's going to be? Oh my gosh, And I think the bone is sticking out of the guy's leg right there. Oh no. Watching Joe Theismann, 17
Yeah.
times on reruns.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, exactly.
Nah, bro. I saw the first one. I knew what happened. I was like, yeah, nah, that's enough. But anyway, so yeah, Skitter uses her bugs to try to oh, let me back up here. What did you think about this one section where Skitter is thinking to herself prior to the launch of the attack? She's thinking to herself whether or not she's got such a collection of tools in her utility kit as far as attacks that she uses with her insects. She starts thinking about naming them like Pokemon or something like that.
Yeah, I did get a chuckle out of that, that she was having trouble keeping track of what all of her different attack vectors were or whatever. Right. And yeah, it reminded me of the old Justice League cartoon, with the Wonder Twin powers,
Jeez,
form of a bucket,
Gosh, thanks for that.
It was pretty cheesy.
Anyway,
but
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was a funny little interlude right there. And it's weird that it's, talk about gallows humor. You're about to go into this horrible meat grinder thing. You don't know what's going to be there. And it's like, oh, let's tell this quick joke. And it's like, oh, that's funny. And it's like, oh, wait, is that a dude that's all spread out on the wall?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Oh, that's grim.
Oh, wow.
Talk about an emotional roller coaster. You go from laughing 1 second to crying practically the next.
Regent's got Shatterbird under control roughly, but he's got her. As I said, Skitter's using her bugs to try to find out where the 9 are inside Parian's place. Genesis has got her faux crawler form out there, and the villain contingent shows up and commences their attack against the location of the 9. And it's at that point that they make their Skitter and company make their infiltration into the building. and things get really dark then.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, this is some Dean Koontz, Stephen King kind of stuff here.
It kind of reminded me of Hellraiser. I don't know if you remember
Oh, of course, yeah.
that movie, but it was just like, oh man, this is just, like the hooks in every part of the body,
Mm-hmm.
pulling it apart. Oh man, it was and then he's still alive. And
Yeah,
then he's like wired up to fake nerves so that if you try to get near him anyway, you can
yeah.
feel it.
That
It
that
was just,
that disturbed me. I mean,
oh yeah, that was just
and then okay, so this gets to a couple of questions. Was Skitter wrong to stop Ballistic from killing Gru?
no. I felt like that was Ballistic feeling guilty for screwing up earlier and wanting to try to rectify things or keep other people from getting hurt or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's it's tough to it's not an easy equation. There's a ton of variables involved here, but I would have to say that uh, Ballistic was wrong to suggest that. The whole reason they were there was to try to save him, and it it wasn't hopeless. There was still a slight chance. So I don't know. I guess I'm just the eternal optimist, but I think Ballistic was being very fatalistic at that point, and that was a bad call on his part.
I don't know, bro. I got frustrated with Skitter. I think because her hesitancy began to I guess I was of the mind, that there was no helping him, and that her hesitation was putting the rest of the team in danger. I think that's where I was coming from in my first read. So
Mm.
I got a little, and even now when we were prepping for this episode and I was rereading it, I think some of that frustration, that latent frustration I had with her, was still there. It could be that Wildbow is intended us to feel that way. We just don't know. You and I are just slightly on different sides of the issue, which is probably a tribute to good writing,
Mm.
having that ambiguity there.
I agree. Yeah, this is one of those things where it's pushing a lot of buttons,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's going to affect people in lots of different ways. And on a reread, I might agree with you. There's always that point where somebody's in a horrible position, and it seems like there's no way that they can extricate their partner or the person they're trying to rescue.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I've just seen, too many Disney movies or whatever happy ending movies, and just like, now you gotta go for it, because what's life going to be like if somebody this important that relied on you isn't rescued?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it worth going on? So I don't know. Maybe that's selling my life short, or the character's life short. But I don't know if you ever read the Thomas Covenant books.
No, I'm not
Um,
familiar with those.
it's a really interesting story about a guy who basically hits his head and then goes somewhere, and it's another plane of existence kind of thing.
Mm.
But there's one scene, and it's more of a Tolkien type place that he ends up in, and they have giants and everything. But the cool thing about the giants is they can't be burned. They can feel the pain from fire, but they aren't burned by it.
Oh.
And so they oftentimes do kind of an emotional cleansing, almost like walking through fire. They'll hold their hand in a fire to feel the pain and try to cleanse themselves, but they won't be hurt by it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one really cool scene where the main character has to cross this lake of lava, and there's just no way across it. But he has a giant with him, and so the giant picks him up and starts running across the lava,
Oh
and
wow.
slowly sinking into it, feeling all the flame, but not burning up. And
Right.
then just before he sinks all the way in, he throws the guy the rest of the way across to the solid ground.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, it turns out the giant survived. But it's like Gandalf the White, he went through this total transformation. And so I'm always kind of in those mindsets, I guess, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, all right, yeah, I might have to go through the fire to rescue this person, but I'm willing to bet that I will be better for it in some way. And I'm guessing that's where Skitter's kind of coming through. Either I'm gonna make it through and be better, or I'm gonna die trying.
Yeah. Okay. All right. As the team tries to figure out just what they're going to do to try to rescue Gru, all of a sudden people start dropping. Turns turns out that Bonesaw has wrapped herself inside a cadaver and was pelting everybody with darts to knock them out. She hits Skitter 3 times, but of course her costume doesn't allow them to penetrate. And what does she end up doing? She ends up blowing this dust in her face.
Well, there are a couple things. Yeah. So Skitter detects the dust the first time, but then
Oh, the spiders attack.
a
Yeah,
bunch of the spiders were hidden in corpses too. And so
yeah,
it's just like, oh, dude, this is getting grimmer and grimmer. It's just she just saw Hannibal Lecter's face cover and raised him a whole body. It's just it's
dude.
pretty gross there.
God. Um, yeah. So yeah, she does. She gets the better of the entire team. Bonesaw, that is, gets the better of the entire team and stacks them like cordwood almost, and they're all paralyzed. And that's where this, however old she is, little surgical psychopath begins to hold forth and torture Skitter. That moves us on into chapter 9. The passengers. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's a interesting turn of phrase. It kind of harkens back to, in a silly way, I guess, kind of like Jiminy Cricket or
Sure.
the Conscience, but in a more twisted way. And then it's just it's hard because there's not a real parallel you can draw where there would be this thing that would kind of trigger you, but then isn't detectable anymore. It's almost one of those concepts that words kind of fail to describe it. And so, and Bonesaw, as twisted as she is just, making up stuff to kind of try to describe it, and in a kind of a sick, playful way. And so it's hard to figure out what's her being goofy and twisted and what is legitimate at that point. But then we have the really cool thing where Skitter kind of goes off into the ether again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really
trigger
fascinating.
vision.
Yeah. Is that what it's kind of called in the community, or
Yeah, yeah. She has
okay.
her she has a trigger vision. If well, I guess you can't have one without the other. If Bonesaw wasn't a murderous psychopath, this data that she's gathering, I mean, she could really be a great researcher as far as parahuman abilities and stuff. But the only reason she has this data is she's killed God knows how many people.
Yeah, that's that fine line.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day when people were trying to figure out how human anatomy worked, you had folks that would work on cadavers and kind of do forensic science. But then there were some people that were like, well, no, we got to see how it works when the people are alive. So, and then you're like, what? And so it's just, yeah, it's horrible. But yeah, I imagine that the folks at Cauldron started or have somebody similar to that, that isn't maybe as psychopathic, but is just as into and passionate about biological tinkering and trying to figure these things out.
Good point. Yeah, because they're actually selling powers. They figured out some kind of way to synthesize and generate powers. So the other side of this coin, possibly.
Possibly, yeah.
Bonesaw was able to create various insect repellents that killed Skitter's bugs, a mist, and anytime any of the insects got near got near Bonesaw, they drop. There was at one point when Bonesaw was talking about the passenger and the various sections of the brain that controlled the powers. Skitter had called forth her insects to attack Bonesaw. She had no fine control over her swarm, but she had more of a blunt instrument kind of control over them, and was still able to get them to work. She got them to form a wall. They got them to attack her, at least attempt that. And oh yeah, there was a couple of times she noted that the stronger bugs were the flying insects were hauling spiders and doing some of her standard attacks for her, even without her directly willing that. Interesting development.
Definitely. And Bonesaw is very surprised by that as well. She had tailored her paralytic to specifically allow the powers to be monitored, but not to be active, because she didn't want people messing with her while she was trying to do stuff. And yet, whatever she did wasn't sufficient to slow down Skitter, at least not shut her down totally. She did lose the fine control and that kind of thing, but somehow she's still able to do some stuff. So, maybe I'm underestimating her power level. Master 7 might be too low. She might be higher than that. But yeah, Bonesaw is just now not only is she giddy and dancing around, she's drooling. She's so excited to try to get into Skitter's brain. And it's like, oh, it's just a hole big enough to put my hand in. Like, that is a huge hole.
Yes.
I mean, don't you have any tools? Can't you use one of those little, endoscopic things or something? Do you have to make a Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, oh gosh. It's a bad situation. Let's see here. Parian is actually still in the building, and she is inside one of her doll creations. As all seems lost, she gets her doll creation into the location where Bonesaw is with our team there, and begins to attack Bonesaw, and that forestalls the attack a little bit. The lobotomy that poor Skitter was about to undergo. I was thinking about this today. There was that one section where it said that Parian threw 30 some odd needles and thread to Bonesaw, stuck them in her and lifted her off the ground. Parian doesn't fancy herself a combatant, but if she was more like Taylor Hebert, she might actually be a pretty dangerous Kate. Maybe not as powerful as, like Flechette or somebody like that, but I mean, still.
Well, I definitely agree. And she could be like an ultimate stealth thing, similar to what Bonesaw did, hide in a cadaver and shoot darts. Orion could just be a big stuffed animal in a big pile and then just be shooting needles out at people and taking them out through the eyeball or something. Yeah. So she could be super effective. And I think Wildbow's just trying to show there that when pushed to an extreme, even people who are pacifists by nature can become pretty go on the offensive,
right,
and can decide to strike back, because her whole family's been messed up, and And then Bonesaw tries to make her feel better. I say, oh, they're not dead. They just look like the 9 now. So it's like, well, that's like worse. So one thing though that was in here that I wanted to touch on was that Skitter does a delaying tactic
Mm-hmm.
to let Parian get into position. And that, I think, again, shows in spite of all the drugs in her, she's still got quite a bit of faculties that are she's able to. I mean, it doesn't talk about anybody else moving at all
Mm-mm.
or doing anything. Now I know that she got dosed with this powder instead of the darts, so that might be the difference. But still, pretty amazing how much she's able to kind of stay on the ball and try to keep the game alive. It's,
Right.
it's like one of those, kick returns where you're like throwing it across the field and it's, oh, now, no, you get behind me and then I'll lateral it. And, and it
Yeah.
just, and she keeps churning away at it, in spite of everything. So that's pretty admirable.
Bonesaw takes out Parian's big stuffed dinosaur, spits a caustic agent of some kind in Parian's eyes. Poor girl is, I'm pretty sure she's blind as she stumbles over to the sink trying to turn on the water and rinse her face off. Just not long after that, Jack and Burnscar show up. Jack's like, hey, we got to make a hasty retreat. Pick 3 people that you want to bring with you, and we're going to torch the rest. And not long after that, that's when Brian has his second trigger event.
I reread this section quite a bit because it was hard there was so much going on. It was hard for me to keep things straight. And Skitter had just kind of had that trigger vision. And so it was kind of, is what's coming from where? It was a lot of things coming at you from different directions, but really well written. And I figured once Parian went down, that was kind of like the, subconscious ace in the hole that Skitter might be thinking about. And I figured, that's it. This, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to stumble across Panacea. She's going to bring her back to life. I don't know what's going to happen. But then Gru, in spite of being, spread out like a jigsaw puzzle, is somehow having a second trigger event when not only Skitter, but his sister are further threatened. So
that was a pretty amazing description that we get here of what Skitter saw during her trigger vision. The enormity of these beings, the multi-dimension existence that they seem to have. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, not to get too Christian, but when I'm praying, I often think about God in a similar way, that he's able to see the infinity of events or possible events all at the same time and comprehend it all, and it all is happening according to his plan and that kind of thing. So this part actually resonated with me quite a bit, in that, not saying that these things are God or anything, because there's 2 of them for one thing, but just that I've thought in those terms before. And it was really well written. I thought that you have these, it's kind of like, Coil going through, all right, there's just one split, but they're looking at 10 billion splits.
Right.
And all the possibilities, like Taylor described, an Earth in an ice age, or an Earth with hardly any people on it, Earth with 12 billion people on it. And, these are all possibilities that could occur, and they're sifting through all of these. And then they kind of agree on, oh, this is the one that we want. Well, let's see what happens with this. It's in a sick way, it's almost like, them going through the menu on DirecTV with a trillion channels and saying, oh yeah, that's a good one. Let's watch that show. but they're obviously doing something, right? They're actually influencing it. They're entering into that reality in some way
Mhm.
and changing it. And so that kind of begs the question, well, why one over the other? And at some other time or other parallel universe, did they try something else and agree on a different one? I don't know, but it was really well described. Wildbow did a great job of. I've really pictured it.
Mhm. Mhm. As part of his trigger, Gru does several things. He heals himself, he kills Burn Scar, and he heals his teammates. Everyone ends up back, normal, as it were. Jack has to rescue Bone Scott. Pardon me. Jack has to rescue Bonesaw from this entity, this Brian-esque entity. Do you have any thoughts about that? Different, unexpected.
Very different and unexpected. I agree. Yeah. Well, one thing I want to harken back to is that as Bonesaw is trying to decide what toys to take with her on the trip,
Yeah.
they note that Gru's heart starts beating faster, and he's reacting as they're going to take Skitter.
Mm-hmm.
And both Bonesaw and Jack notice that. And so that comes up more in the next chapter. But they just kind of make light of it, like, oh, yeah, whatever, not
Yeah.
realizing that they're, poking the tiger, basically. But yeah, as far as the manifestations, it's kind of a little bit reminiscent of the swarm clones or that kind of thing. But being able to actually, it kind of reminded me of like Sandman from Marvel, where he could take all this stuff and form it into like a giant hand and
Mm-hmm.
pound things, but it's actually taking on this, and it kind of had a yin and yang feel to it. It was like this black and white, and it was partially formed, but yeah, it devastated Burn Scar. It just grabbed her by the head and
Yeah.
splattered her, and so, and then it's invincible. It's not flesh, so Jack can't do anything to do it. So he has to cut off Bonesaw's hands so that she can get away, which is just, wow, how grim is that? It kind of gets lost in all the other grimness, but it's like, oh yeah, you were about to get captured, so I cut your hands off. It'll be okay.
Yeah, and then they just bolt. Yeah, Jack is kind of, nonchalant. Oh, geez, the things I have to put up with. Geez, let me chop off your
Right.
arms so we can get away.
Oh my goodness.
Then there's this really after he heals everybody and he falls to his knees and he's weeping. There's this really tender moment where Skitter goes to approach him. Tattletale stops her and whispers something in the imp's ear, and she says, she goes over to Brian and says, "Hey, big brother," real tenderly, "let's get out of here." And they calmly usher him away, and that was a real moment of a real touching moment between the two of them.
Definitely, yeah. And I didn't really get it, why it was better for one than the other until we get into chapter 10. And then it's like, well, yeah, big brother is always going to try to save the little sister.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter how much it takes out of them, they're going to be grateful in some way for comfort from that, or gratefulness from that younger sibling. But, as we see in the next chapter, there's such mixed feelings that it's like, it's similar to Jack's thing. It's like, gosh darn it, I had to save you again, and look what you made me do. I didn't. This stinks. I had to be tortured.
Yeah, let's roll into chapter 10, and that scene. We did start off with the team back at Skitter's place. Oh, pardon me, at Brian's place. And they spend the night there trying to recover, and that's where Skitter and Brian have a pretty frank talk. he confesses that he triggered when he was thinking of her and seeing the danger that she was in.
Mm.
Oh boy, it was pretty deep. He heaps a lot of scorn her way. How much of that is the result of him being conflicted and dealing with his new powers, or how much of that is real? We're not really sure, are we?
I don't think so, but I've got another wrinkle that might be part of this.
Okay.
So, as he's talking about his new powers, he talks about how he can see the other cape's power and then kind of connect to it and
Siphon
then
off a little
borrow it a
bit.
little bit or siphon off of it a little bit. Yeah. And so I wonder if more is coming in that siphoning than just the power. So if there's any of the feelings or emotions coming across,
Okay.
then like Bitch was very mad and blaming Taylor for a lot of things, blaming Skitter for a lot of things, and maybe when Brian was healing Bitch, then
No, she
I
wasn't
forget,
there. She
she
wasn't.
wasn't there.
She was. Trickster didn't teleport her in.
That's right. That's right. She was going to be back up outside or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, maybe I mean, Ballistic obviously wanted to,
Yeah.
cut and run. So maybe as he was touching some of these other folks, something bled across in some way is what
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking. And so, and it's so new for him. He's having trouble sorting out what are his feelings and what are after effects, if you will. So that was just a thought that occurred to me as he was going through this, because it seemed like he was really bouncing from pillar to post. One
Mm-hmm.
minute he was like, "Come sit next to me," and then the next minute was, "You suck," and then the
Yeah.
next minute is, I have feelings for you. Oh, I didn't mean that. Yes, I did mean that. No, I didn't mean it. And so it's almost like he's got multiple things he's trying to integrate, and I'm wondering if that's bleed over from people he interacted with his new power.
So not just the powers. Some you're speculating possibly some emotional picking up of feelings around him, or as part of
Yeah,
the power. It could be.
yeah, just total speculation on my part, but
Okay.
in that the trigger event usually causes certain powers to come out, and in the Cauldron interlude it talked about how if you've got messed up stuff going on, then you could end up looking messed up. Then it seems like there is some kind of interaction between emotions and trigger events and possibly the power that you get or the
Mm-hmm.
the result you get. And so maybe it's something analogous to that.
Okay. Um, as Brian and Taylor are talking, Brian relays to her the conversation he had with the Tattletale about this new power. It turns out that they think it's just one new power, but it manifests differently. As you were alluding to the fact that people inside his darkness, he can borrow from or siphon off part of their power, which is why he was able to grant the team regeneration from, I forget the name of the cape, one of the folks from Hook Wolf's team. That person does,
Olatha or something like that.
yeah, something along those lines. And he was able to use that power, brief as it was, to heal people. And yeah, boy, he lays into her at one point, as you said, and she decides, well, hey, maybe you say the word and I'm gone. Kind of one of those. I don't want to cause you pain. Perhaps I'd be, things would be better off if I just left, kind of things.
I think she realizes that he's right, or he could be. She definitely sees his side of it. And whether there's a legitimate reason for the decision she made or there isn't, it still put everybody's bacon in the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a very, very low chance that everybody was going to get out alive. It took this second trigger event, which hardly ever happens,
Right.
and then it triggering a power that had multiple aspects that could do all this stuff. So it's, I think the logical part, the strategic part of her is able to look at it a little dispassionately and say, oh yeah, we had just a tiny fraction of a chance of survival. And that was basically for a big part on me. Now,
Mm-hmm.
as I was looking through this, Trickster was the one that came up with the idea behind this part of the plan.
Right.
And so, but she doesn't throw him under the bus. She realizes that she should have poked holes in or whatever. Now, she says over and over again that she was really tired. She hadn't been sleeping. They had this ongoing battle with the Nine, constant stress. Her dearest friend probably is in their clutches. And so you can't expect there to be, great decisions being made. But she recognizes that she was a big part of what happened, and that maybe it is better that she would be there.
In the end, he asked her, he says, hey, no, that's not what I want. I don't want you to leave. And he asked her to stay. And they sit down and they watch some TV without really watching it. They just kind of sit there and were together. And maybe that was just enough for what he needed.
I think so. Yeah, I think he's really confused right now. He's just got swirling emotions. He was totally helpless, and not only seeing Skitter looking and the rest of his teammates go down, but also his sister, who he pretty much vowed to protect. And then, he had been just, run through a meat grinder and strained out, and
Mm-hmm.
and had been able to save everybody, but at what cost to himself. And so he's really swirling right now, I guess is one way to put it. But yeah, sometimes the best thing you can do for someone in that position is just, sit quietly by their side and give them time to try to pull themselves back together.
And one of the final things that Skitter does is she calls up her contact at Coil's base and asks her to get a message to the Protectorate, letting them know the situation at Burn Scar's toast. No pun intended. Bonesaw is severely injured, and she leaves them with closes the message with "Thanks for the help." So yeah, I kind of a final dig at the PHQ in that message,
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
They had their chance. The villains decided to go ahead and go for it anyway without their help, and paid a huge price for it. Turned out okay in the end, but as far as we can tell so far, but who knows? And yeah, the Protectorate, who's supposed to be protecting, is just standing on the sideline because of, not all the I's were dotted and the T's crossed the way they wanted. So yeah, I think I would have been a little bit more forceful in my dig, but.
And now we move into our final section, which will be Interlude 13, and we get to visit with Director Piggott as she tries to raise the carcass of the Protectorate in Brockton Bay from the ashes and the drubbing from Leviathan.
Well, and from Shatterbird, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they are totally dependent on computers, and I can't imagine doing my job. I'm sure you can probably imagine. I mean, back in the day, we all did drafting by hand, right?
Yeah.
But who wants to do that these days?
No, thank you.
Yeah, I've been doing a thing where I try to write in a journal every morning instead of typing it up, and my hand cramps up way faster than I remember it doing in the old days. I can't imagine writing a 10-page essay or anything. I think I'd be a cripple. I'd have to have to get some kind of injection in my hand to get it unparalyzed. But so yeah, to be a director of a big thing like the Protectorate in this kind of environment after all these disasters and all the paperwork and everything, I can't imagine not doing it without computers. That must have been so demoralizing. But she's a director. She's got to try to do her job. So she just keeps pushing through.
Now, we've seen Director Piggott from a couple of different people's points of view. How'd you like getting a look inside with her as the POV for this interlude?
I thought it was good. It was another good example of Wildbow trying to make people three-dimensional. She's definitely aware of her shortcomings and that she, detects when people are being affected by those shortcomings. But she's kind of accepted that that's who she is. And it kind of reminded me of the drill sergeant folks that you see in movies sometimes, where it's like they know that the best way to get people ready for battle is to make them have a common enemy, and that's got to be the drill sergeant at the beginning. And they can't be friends with people. They can't treat them nice. They got to toughen them up. They got to break them loose from where they were. And they know that they're being crappy, they're treating people poorly, but they also know that it's for the other people's best interest. And so you kind of get that. That's the picture I got to Piggott from this.
She is watching video from one of the first encounters with Siberian, in which this is, I guess, early on when the Protectorate they were still kind of standing up the organization. And this is where they lost one of the primary members, Hero. He was killed by Siberian.
Yeah, and they thought they had a great plan and everything, and yeah, it looked like two people had died, and she can, she's watched the thing a number of times, and this was just one of the 9, taking them all on and wiping them out.
Yeah. This is where we find out that Alexandria had been there at that fight. It's the Hero, Alexandria, Legend, and Eidolon. Again, she's not invincible, and Alexandria got severely injured. And Piggott, even though the volume was off on this video she was watching, she could inside her mind she could hear the voices, the screams of pain and horror at what was being done.
Yeah, and Legend crying out over what he believed were the death of 2 teammates. And that shows part of the hardening of the heart that someone in Piggott's position has to do. They've got to realize that they're putting people in harm's way, and that people aren't going to come back, but they've got to make that choice anyway. And it seems like, a common way to get through that is just to try to harden your heart, try to not think about it, try to push past it. But even in the quiet moments, you can still hear those cries and screams and stuff. So
yeah. Legend comes up to her office, and as they get ready to go meet with the rest of the squad, they were discussing about family life, and it turns out that Legend had adopted a child. And this is the first talk that we hear about the idea of 3rd generation capes. And apparently a 3rd generation cape had been discovered in Toronto, and that was big news.
And it was a 5-year-old that manifested the powers. So, at a very young age and in an uncontrolled way. And so, yeah,
so capes aren't going
continuing
anywhere.
To evolve. Yeah, exactly. It seems to be increasing.
Yeah. It appears they got Skitter's note. Yeah, she and Legend go down to the where the techs are, and they read through the note, and she says, she gets to the part where it says, "Thanks for the help," and Piggott says, "I can't help but read that in a sarcastic tone." And Legend says, "The bug girl, Skitter," and you're like, "Yeah, well, yeah, it's her." And we turned down a chance to help him out, and so she's, this Skitter's probably bitter about this whole thing.
Definitely, yeah. But it does, as Pickett say, move up their timeline because now the nine has probably got to be pretty worried about how things are going, and they've lost at least one member, and another one's been incapacitated. So,
Mm-hmm.
so now things are coming to a head.
Yeah, and the Undersiders during this discussion between the local Protectorate Legend and his team from out of town and the local wards, all of a sudden people are looking at the Undersiders and going, hey, yeah, after we've got to deal with the nine, but these Undersiders are getting to be a kind of a powerful bunch.
Yeah, it's interesting how fast they've kind of come to the top of the most wanted list, as I was saying earlier. But when you keep standing toe to toe with the baddest people in town and coming out at least in a draw, but in some
Yeah,
cases looking like you're winning, then yeah, the cops are going to take notice, and they're going to have to prepare for not just one gang but two, and
they're getting attention.
for sure, yeah, not the good kind, unfortunately.
We do during this conference, this meeting, we do get reminded that Coyle has a spy amongst the wards. Chariot. At this moment, where his name comes up is when Piggott was speaking to the wards and was asking for volunteers to join on the upcoming assault mission against the Nine. And then we get the reminder at that point that that Chariot is amongst them, and so we've got him, and Piggott's speculating on whether or not kind of a, okay, well, Coyle, does Coyle know that I know that he knows that this Chariot guy is a spy kind of thing?
Exactly. Yeah, wheels within wheels again. And it's like, well, is it better to take care of the spy, or is it better to feed him disinformation
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully keep your opponent off guard? And Piggott's gone down that route, and then has to pull folks aside afterwards and kind of tell them that there's other plans in the works. But yeah, Piggott intentionally calls out Tattletale's Undersiders
Yes.
and wondering about how strong her powers are and how much information she's able to glean. So interesting, like you said, getting all the attention and not in a good way.
And as we're winding toward the end of this, that's where they Piggott starts discussing the plan of attack against the Nine, and that's kind of why they turned down the opportunity, or one of the reasons, I guess, they turned down the opportunity to work with the Undersiders. They've got a bunch of munitions from Bakuda, and they're going to deploy those. They use some of them. Miss Militia used some of them against Leviathan, and they're going to use a few more as they plan on laying waste in their attack to the Nine.
I think that's a great plan. That's something that, a group like the Nine, who has done their homework time and again to figure out what they're up against, they may not factor that in. So I think that's a great backup plan. First we'll burn it, then we'll pour acid on it, and then we'll bury it, that kind of thing. So you got to have multiple layers, right? And they teach you that in martial arts, right?
Yeah.
You don't plan on knocking somebody out with a one punch. You do a combination every time. It's a combination. So
and that sets us up going into arc 14. There's going to be a pretty big confluence of events going on, I should imagine. So stay tuned for that.
looking forward to it.
That takes us to the end of arc 13. And as we get ready for your overall impressions, I want to now bring forth this question we have from YouTube, from Dejected Gesture Fridge Edition. And he says, I have a question for Andy. Putting together all of the hints and clues the story has revealed thus far, what is your current theory on the origin of powers, the passengers, and the story behind the first parahuman, Scion?
Well, I guess we've touched on that a little bit here and there, but there seem to be these entities that are cruising through the multiverse, and they probably have seen it all, and they're looking for new and exciting stimulation, and they came across Earth. They sifted through all the possibilities. They continue to sift through those, and they decided, well, we will try giving one person power and see what happens. They gave Scion, something similar to Dr. Manhattan or Superman, kind of the best of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they realized that it made him almost inhuman. He doesn't seem to connect with people at all or relate to things. He just flies around trying to save people. So then, perhaps they decided, all right, well, let's try giving a little bit to different people in different ways and see how that works. So kind of just they continue to experiment and see what's going to happen. I don't know if it's just curiosity on their part, if they're just kind of bored, or if they have some kind of goal. It would be interesting if it was some kind of thing where these entities had something that they were trying to combat, and they were trying to develop a weapon, through these manipulations, and see if they could come up with something that would help them win the war, so to speak. I don't know if that's in there, but yeah, I think that's, so far it just seems like they're entertaining themselves by seeing what happens if they add things to the human mix, and watch what happens when they kick the anthill, so to speak.
Okay. And your overall impressions of the arc?
Oh man, this was a tough one. The torture things, I do okay with horror stuff, but this was extra grim.
Uh-huh.
And and Wildbow, being such a good author with his descriptions, made it a little too vivid, being able to picture Gru or picture Bonesaw crawling out of a corpse, and
Yeah.
junk dripping off of her, and just the idea of the spiders crawling out of different corpses too, and the head getting sawed open. It was pretty rough. I enjoyed it, but if I was my son's age, I might have nightmares after reading that.
Well, like I said, I'm pretty sure I started and stopped this particular arc a couple of different times. So, All right. And now it's time for Andy to announce his choice for key character of the arc. Whether hero or villain, cape or civilian, Andy will identify the character that stood out to him, whether it's for good or ill. Andy, who's your selection and why?
This was a tough one. There were a lot of key moments, and a lot of different things that happened. Just how massive the powers that Gru has after the second trigger event, that really stands out to me. But the person that I kept coming back to was Ballistic.
Mm-hmm.
And, I really am mad at him. They had this great plan, and he hesitated at exactly the wrong moment. If it turns out, that we find out that Cherish was involved and was just trying to save her own bacon, then I'll give him a pass. But I'm not sure that's what happened. So for right now, for ill, Ballistic is my key character, because first he messed up the original plan, and then he wanted to kill Gru just to save his own butt. So yeah, Ballistic is my choice in a bad way.
All right. All right. Thanks for that, sir. And our review of Arc 13 is now complete. Thanks again for the questions and comments. Please join us for please join us for part 1 of our Arc 14 review. And until next time, take care.
I'm really excited for this next part. As I had mentioned, my son stopped reading on Arc 13, so this is something I have even no inklings about. And it, as Keith said, it's lining up to be a battle royale. So really excited to dive into it, and I hope you'll join us for the podcast next time.
Thanks for joining us in this video. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more information in the link down below. Catch you later.